Make some noise! No. All right. What a hell of a way to kick off the morning. I mean, that was some exciting news, and yes, I'm biased, and I don't care. Thank you, Michael, Zip, Misha, Ian, to the Nike team here in the room. This is absolutely thrilling. As you can see, we're talking about community and movement and all the fun things, right? But now we're gonna switch gears just a little bit. I'm really excited about this next one. When talking about community and movement, walking and running always seem to rise to the top of the most democratic of fitness hobbies. After all, it just takes a pair of kicks, right? That's all you need to get started. But I have to say, a pair of sneakers is not nearly enough for marginalized communities. Everybody in this room, on the live stream, we all have a responsibility and we must lean in. We have to create safe and inclusive spaces for everyone, regardless of your race, regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of your gender identity or sexual orientation. Whether you're creating an app that's inspiring the world to move, or you're creating the very shoes that we just lace up to go explore the world around us. Our first panel of the day, I am super excited about, because it takes more than a pair of shoes unlocking equitable access to movement. Now, this is probably my favorite part. My dear friend is going to be moderating this panel. She's kick-ass. She's an author. She's co-founder of Black Trail Runners. She is a phenomenal person, and I can go on and on and on and on. And I know she's getting super embarrassed right now, and I love it. But welcome to the stage, Sabrina Pace Humphreys. I affectionately call her Sab, and she has assembled an all-star squad for this next conversation.
What an introduction. I first met Brian last year in Chamonix. And I wanted to start out before I introduce my all-star panel by saying, like, manifestation and action-orientated decision-making brought me here. This is my first ever trip to LA. And I can remember saying to Michael and Brian and Chip last year, anyone who would listen, like, we're doing this in Chamonix this year, we're having this conversation, next year LA. And I'm here, people. So, I cannot wait to get into this conversation. I have got the best panel today of inspirational activists and change makers. So, without further ado, I want to welcome Rassan Bahati to the stage. Give him a cheer. Woo! Guarina Lopez, please join me on the stage. And Kira Smalls, please come join us. And last but not least, my UK brother from another mother, Mr. Charlie Dark. Have a seat, everyone, have a seat. Welcome, welcome. So we're here, we're in LA, we're together, we're gonna get deep fast, okay? It takes more than a pair of shoes. I mean, when I saw that title of our panel, it reminded me of one of the first ever responses that Black Trail Runners had when we launched in 2020 to why we existed. Because all you need is a pair of shoes, right? What I want to start talking about is you, and there is no one better to introduce themselves than you. So I want to start with you, Rassan. Can you just tell the audience, I mean, how could they not know who you are? But introduce yourself.
Yeah. welcome everyone. I'm excited to be here, but you're in my hometown for the most part. I'm a guy born and raised in the concrete jungle of Compton, California, and most of the things you probably know about Compton are fairly true when I was growing up in the 80s. I lived through the riots, I lived through the drug epidemic, the violence and everything else, and through my way of violence of assaulting my middle school teacher, I found the sport of cycling as a form of punishment. And I think to do it some justice, I have to do it some justice. He didn't say cycling, which is the correct nomenclature for what we do. He said bikes, and I thought bikes was motorcycles, and that's how I got involved. So maybe one day Strava and the moto stuff will come head to head. Yeah, I end up, finding the sport of cycling on the velodrome where the 1984 Olympics were held, where the cheetah himself, Nelson Vels, won a silver medal, then the first African American to do it. And yeah, didn't really like it. I was turned off because no one looked like me. And they were wearing funny clothes at the same time. But fast forwarding, I just loved the sport, fell in love with it, and been doing it for over 22 years.
Wow. Thank you. And Guarina?
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm super honored to be here with everyone. My name is Guarina Lopez. I'm the founder of Native Women Ride. I'm a runner, and I'm also a cyclist. I come from the Pascuayaqui tribe in Tucson, Arizona, and I am currently based in Piscataway Territory in Washington, D.C. I'm a filmmaker, I'm a photographer, I'm a storyteller, and running and movement really are these tools that help me bring stories from our communities out into the public, and social media has been very helpful for that. I had two films that were shown last night. One was about running. It's called Running is Prayer, and the other one is Carlisle 200, which is going to premiere on Saturday at Filmed by Bike. And it is a story about my prayer run, raising awareness about the history of Native American boarding schools and assimilation. And so the work that I do can be a little heavy, but Native Women Ride functions to not only bring more Indigenous people to the start line of bike races, but also I have a mutual aid. I try to get people's bikes fixed. The financial barrier to entry on bikes is astounding, and we'll get to that. And so, yeah, I mean, I've been working in the running space as an Indigenous runner, as working on the ground as an activist for many years, and so I just kind of transferred what I was doing in organizing into the running space, and then shifted that mind frame into cycling, which was a very different kind of space, but the commonality, the thread that runs through it all is the social justice aspect. And that's what we're here to speak about today is this idea of marginalized communities and how can we actually center ourselves in these spaces. How can we build community, but also not have those communities be siloed, right? We don't want to reenact Jim Crow. We don't want to reenact redlining. We're not trying to rename separate but equal in these spaces, right? Because that didn't work the first time. It didn't exist. So I try to bring those conversations.
And we will be discussing that today.
I gotta go after you. Wow. Good morning. My name is Kiara Smalls. She, her pronouns. I'm from the great city of Philadelphia. Woo! Also known as the Lenape lands. I also would be remiss if I don't say that I am Geneva Josie's and Joe Rose's granddaughter, and I have two young nephews who think I have the coolest job in the world. And so I am the executive director of the Running Industry Diversity Coalition, RIDC for short. And RIDC came together in 2020 after the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. And so leaders in the running industry, from the retail shops to the brands, to the running crews and the race organizers, said, what can we do to integrate racial justice into the running industry? And so that's the work I do at the RIDC. And before the RIDC, I was in the tech industry, helping build scalable startups. And I was part of launching bike share program in Philadelphia and dabbled in some activities in the bike share programs in Vegas and Los Angeles. So if you rode them in any of those cities, let's talk.
And Mr. Charlie Dark.
People. My name is Charlie Dark. I'm a DJ, record producer, mentor young people, and Lululemon Global Ambassador. And most people know me as being the founder of the Run Dem Crew, which is an urban run collective based in London. And we're known for exploring cities under the cover of darkness. That's the kind of tagline. But essentially, we're one of the organizations that is credited with helping to remix, re-energize, and kind of drag running from where it was in 2006 to where you find it now. So it's great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
And anyone here took part in London Marathon this year? Okay, not too many people.
No,
But like the epic mile 21 Run Dem Crew is just a party unlike any other and makes you want to run a marathon.
Yeah.
We talk about, and I want to get deep into the communities that we've built, the communities that you have built, but building community comes from somewhere. And ultimately, we've all found a way of movement that we are extremely passionate about. For myself, I was not a runner. I hated running. I would laugh at runners as I drove past them in the car. And it was because of severe postnatal depression after the birth of my fourth child that my doctor said, you need to do something. You need to do something that takes you outside. Why not try running? And I was so desperate to get out of that dark place that I started running, and it's changed my life. So, Guarina, can you, first and foremost, can you talk about your passion for movement and what that means to you? And then what we will do is go on and talk about ultimately what our passions for movement mean for our communities and the communities we've created.
Sure. So last night, if some of you attended, this might be a little bit redundant, but I was able to share some of my films, and I sat with Yarika Fields, and we both tapped into this. I guess it's kind of just, it's part of our heritage. Running is, yes, it is a sport. It's also deeply tied into many of our ceremonies, and it's part of many indigenous communities' ways of movement and of being a messenger. And growing up with my tribe and participating in my ceremonies and alongside other communities, movement is part of it. It's part of prayer, it's part of ceremony, it's part of life, it's part of connecting with the ecosystems that you live in. And so, you know, something that is often said in indigenous communities is that there's no separation between the land and the people. Most of our land bases, we're named after. The same word for the name of your tribe is the same word for people as well as the land base. And so I, was very lucky to, even as an urban native most of my life, that is the mind frame that my dad really imprinted in my brother and I. And so movement has functioned very much like for you as something that has helped with depression, for sure. I do it every day. It's on my schedule. Nobody is allowed to bother me during that time. Everybody knows. My son, I swam laps until 2 days before I gave birth, and he knows I'll always be gone in the morning. But it is, we can figure out how to use it in all these different ways, and I think that's something that is needs to become part of the conversation. So it's not just about numbers, it's not just about competition, because, you know, as we know, all of us in the work that we do, yes, that might be the kind of trick, right? Bikes. You know, you're kind of getting in trouble, you want to get on a bike, right? You want to join the run team. But what we know is that it builds camaraderie, and for a lot of people who don't have cohesive family structures or don't really have that model in front of them, you know, a lot of these run groups, the after-school track clubs or whatnot, they can really fill that space, and they create these kind of alternative, additional families. And so for me, I have found that even today, you know, I have a lot of really wonderful friends in the bike community, and I feel like they're my family. They really are. We watch out for each other, not just when we're riding together, not just when we're running together, but I know that they will never leave me on the trail, right? I know that somebody will always be there for me in some way, right? And so that's how I try to enter the space as well, is to be welcoming. And with Native Women Ride, you know, it's a virtual community, but I always say that, you know, my intention is to imagine it as a brick and mortar, like after school club. And so how would I want to, if that were the case, how would I want to get to know my neighbors? How would I want to bring people in and welcome them and make them feel like they're safe, which is very difficult in social media, as you know. And so with Native Women Ride, you know, it's a by us, for us space. And again, you know, when you build community, you're really trying to bring in folks like you, but even within our own communities, we can silo ourselves from one another. And so, you know, I'm constantly aware of that, trying not to be ableist, trying not to be exclusive, really asking other indigenous folks, because we're not a monolith. There's close to 600 federally recognized tribes. I ask them to introduce themselves. How would you like to share where you're from? Not to assume, you know, giving people agency is the most powerful thing you can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Rasan, how did that passion for bikes, not motorbikes, translate into the organization, the foundation, the community that you created?
Yeah, I was racing full time, you know, wanted to try to make it to the top of the sport. I was living in Europe racing with the national team, and I had this moment where my father called me and said, hey, you got an offer to go to school, maybe you should think about it. And it didn't really take me much time to think about it. So I left Belgium, went to Indiana University. And coming from California, of course, it was a huge culture shock. Not even being around people that didn't look like me. I mean, I was in cycling. I was always the raisin in milk. So that wasn't a big deal, right? It was everything else. I had no idea, like, the KKK was founded in Indiana.
Yeah.
Like, we had swastikas in our gymnasium, and so all that stuff was like brand new to me. I thought I wouldn't race a bike again after getting out of college, but what happened was, I think the universe, actually I don't think, I know, the universe pointed me in a direction to race bikes again, because I could have taken a job at EA Sports fresh out of college for $65,000. Instead, I raced bikes for $500 a month. Like, no money, I'm basically racing for my livelihood, right? And it was for a reason, because I went back to Europe and I was winning races and I was winning national titles, and I had this epiphany that I needed to do something in my community to get people on bikes that look like me. And if I didn't continue to race bikes, I would have never reached that point in my life. So in 2010, I launched the Bahati Foundation. I had no idea what I was going to do, how I was going to do it, but through the grace of God, people helped me. I got a lot of pro bono work, and boom, this foundation was launched. And through the years, we crawled and crawled for a long time. And we finally, you know, got our stride and started to jog a little bit. And seeing the impact that the bicycle can have on a child is just, it's mind-blowing. And I always go back to when I was growing up. My parents couldn't do it. I have 5 sisters and a brother on a single income, which my father was the single income. My mom had to raise 7 kids. And so it was hard, you know. My parents couldn't afford to send me anywhere for a bike race, and it took a village. So I wanted to give that same experience to the youth where I grew up, no matter what you look like, just the the marginalized communities. And now, you know, we're 12 years strong. There's kids that have come through our program that have gone on to get college educations, that have gone on to start careers outside of cycling, but they always come back to the bike. And it was that bike that transcended their life. And so I just have a soft spot for helping people because I think, you know, just it's in me innately because everybody helped me. I didn't do it alone. And there's people to this day as a full grown man that still help me to this day. And I think that's really what the Bahati Foundation is about. It's just about popping that bubble, inspiring the youth to do something outside of their comfort zone. Because when I was growing up in Compton, we didn't go anywhere. It was just in our neighborhood. And so, as we all know, there's a world out there that most of us will never see. And that's what the foundation is about, just opening their eyes.
Oh. I don't know if it's the jet lag, but I'm welling up here. Kira, can you talk to us about movement and RIDC?
Yeah. So personally, dare I say, I was forced into running. Anyone else was forced? Voluntold. But as a kid, I was not interested in running. Where I grew up in my neighborhood, you were running because you were running from something, or you thought you were running from something, but you ran and then asked questions later. And so that concept of running for fun or participating in it from a business perspective was nowhere near my doorsteps. And even when I think about my parents and my grandparents, they were focused on making sure we had our basic needs met, not what the benefits of running could be. But in college, I had friends who were interested in running and signing up for a 5K and raising funds, and so I got voluntold to participate. And personally, as someone with asthma, I never thought that I could run, so I didn't have an interest personally. But the 5K allowed me to, that distance allowed me to do a walk run. It allowed me to kind of get my toes wet in this sport. And so I did the 5K. As an asthmatic, I said, I survived. And so I thought, okay, this is possible. And so over the years, I've gone up to the marathon distance. And thank you. And then there was still this disconnect. I would go home from college. My family and friends were not having conversations about running or the benefits of running, or were not interested in joining me on the track or running. And so I wanted to figure out how to bridge that gap. And so I launched a run crew in Philadelphia called City Fit Girls, and now it's named Strides. And our goal was to help women prioritize their physical and mental health, whatever that looked like for them. And that included introducing them to workouts throughout the city, introducing them to resources, free to low cost resources in the running industry. And so we had anywhere between up to 80 women running with us every Wednesday across different neighborhoods in Philadelphia, beyond the business districts, beyond the touristy areas. And so that was my work in Philly. And then I learned about the RIDC, and I was super excited because I felt like I could do the work that I was doing locally, but on the national stage. And when I joined the RIDC, it was great because a lot of my roles, I would bring in that kind of racial justice, some people say diversity, equity, and inclusion. I would bring that lens into whatever my job was. And then with RIDC, it was great because it's what you see is what you get. You go to runningdiversity.com, or you have a conversation and someone from RIDC is there, or someone from the community, you know that we're looking around in the room to see who's there, who's not there, what decisions are being made that impacts everyone. And so I went from no interest in running to, wow, there's an entire industry, there's so many positive benefits. How do I make sure that I connect that bridge between the community I grew up with and the community I'm in now?
Thank you. And Charlie, that passion,
Yeah.
how does that translate into what you have created with Run Dem Crew?
When I discovered running, it came into my life at a time when I really, really needed it because my mental health was really poor. But as I work as a DJ and in the creative industry, I wasn't really in a place where I could talk about my mental health because that was seen as a weakness. I started running in secret and just fell in love with running culture because it's quite weird, you know. But if you come as an outsider, it's like the clothes are weird, the language is weird, there's gear you can buy, there's interesting characters that you meet. But I just looked at it and I was just like, the people who really need running the most, who need movement the most, are never, never, never going to accept it in its present form.
Yes.
So as a DJ, you know, my job is, I'm always thinking 3-4 records ahead. You're loving this record now, and I'm thinking what you're going to be hearing in 10 minutes' time. So I was just like, the Olympics is coming to London. What's running going to look like in 2012? And I realized that if I didn't kind of take it upon myself to just kind of start remixing, tweaking, renaming, bringing new people in and new energy, what was going to happen is this thing that I really had fallen in love with was going to become stagnant and die because new energy was not coming into it. I'm just like, run them crew, because we need to have the most unlikely name that's going to shock the running world. And my whole thing about running is it's like the drug that's inside you that you never knew was there. It's really empowering, particularly for vulnerable people, for people who've come from one addiction who can swap it for movement. There's something that when you introduce running to a young person's life, where everyone around them is telling them, you're nothing, you're a danger, you're a threat. Running gives these people confidence to sit in any situation, whether it's with a teacher, whether it's with the police, whether it's authority, and just be like, there's nothing you can say to me today, because I ran 25 miles yesterday. And more importantly, I ran that distance, and I'm the most unlikely person in the room to run that distance. And that is what, you know, that's why I started doing with Run Them, because I just knew that basically if I could introduce running into people's lives, it would open keys and doors into biking, climbing, snowboarding, kayaking, and other things that you were continually told that these things are not for you. You are not welcome here. And I just know is that, you know, just from being into hip hop, and like when you turn up to the jam with 30 of your mates, no one can tell you you can't come in. So my thing was, let's amass as many people, you know, and many different types of people as possible, because it isn't just about having people of color, but it's about basically creating a safe space where different people can come together, a bit like a dance floor, and learn about each other, explore differences, celebrate similarities, explore the potential of the future, and ultimately have a good time together. Anything is boring when it's just one type of person doing it. But when I'm DJing and I'm playing records and I look out across the dance floor and there's loads of different types of people in the room, that's the best type of party that you can be in. And that's what I wanted to bring into running.
Woo! And brother, you bring it hard. And what I want to talk about is the communities that you've created, the communities that we've created, you know, just under 3 years ago, we had the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, a black man murdered while he was out running, doing the sport that so many of us here love. And then we had the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor, and the world responded. And there was a Tuesday that we call Black Square Tuesday. And at Black Square Tuesday, people made promises. Brands made promises. We're going to do better, be better. Now, we launched Black Trail Runners at that time, but you had been running Run Dem for time. You had been running the Bahati Foundation for time. What did you think when you saw that just under 3 years, over 3 years ago? And how do those promises sit with you now? Woo!
I mean, I immediately was just like, oh gosh, this is low-hanging fruit. Let me just put a black square in my Instagram and be done. It's just like, you know, as someone who's older than a lot of people in the running movement, have been there from, the beginning of the Renaissance, have marched, protested, and done all of that. I just had this feeling that this time it wasn't going to work, and there was other ways, that we needed to approach this. I'm disappointed that there were promises that were made that haven't been honoured, but I'm not surprised.
Why are you not surprised?
Because it's a continual conversation that always happens. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that day people reacted under pressure. Under like, oh my God, I need to do something. I need to be seen to be saying something, otherwise my company's going to get cancelled, and ultimately I'm going to, lose money. So I know that the thing is, it's like these conversations, they take a lot of time, and it takes people to be really honest and to get out of their feelings. And the unfortunate thing about it is kind of like, a lot of times when you're dealing with companies, you're dealing with men. You're dealing with men who kind of like a bit weak, who've reinvented themselves with money and the title of the company. So actually, the conversations get a bit sticky and slightly nervous, and change doesn't really come. But I'm okay with that, because my thing has always been like, I don't really need you, because I can't wait for you to basically catch up to my level, So my thing is just like, whilst you're deliberating and debating what you're going to do, we're just going to keep going and doing the thing, And I always say to people, it's kind of like, my thing now is not about community, because community is a buzzword that's been tarnished by a lot of people who haven't even come from community, know nothing about community, but like to talk a lot about community. Yeah. As someone who has really, really come from community and been raised by the village and the neighborhood and so on and so forth, my thing is about, are you going to empower me and my people? If you're not going to empower me and my people, then let's not have the conversation, let's not mess about. I mean, that's my thing. Because I want to empower and create movements that bring real change, not plastic change.
Woo!
That's my thing,
Yeah. Kira, do you want to come in on that?
I do want to come in on that. First, I want to acknowledge for the people of color in the room, sometimes this topic can be re-traumatizing and re-triggering. And so if you need space to breathe, to drink water, please do. At the RIDC, because it was created during that year, we built a lot of relationships with different brands and organizations at that time. And actually last week, we did we released a report looking back over the last 3 years of running brands, what they said in 2020, and what has happened since then. We didn't just do it from RIDC lens. We did it from the lens of the consumer. And so for consumers, right, it's important where they spend their dollars. They also want to align spending their dollars with companies that align with their values. Then how does a consumer know if a company is continuing to align with their values? And so we did a deep dive of the different running brands. From the consumer's perspective, what can you know? And what we found, which there was some good. There are some organizations that have now, report their progress. They use terms like racial justice and not like some other palatable terms. They interrupt and disrupt within their organizations, and some of that getting past whatever red tape was created to move racial justice work forward. And then there was plenty who, from the consumer perspective, it was really hard to find that information, and a lot of it was non-existent. And so accountability is at the center of everything we do at RIDC. And so how do we go from, it's 3 years from now, but you ask us in 3 more years or 10 more years, we want to be able to say that our entire industry and outdoor industry at large has made progress, and here's what has happened.
Thank you. You touched upon, I think, a really important point there, and it's something that Guarina and I, when we were running today, who did the trail run today? That first warm-up mile was intense, wasn't it? But we had some, and again, as we were talking on our run today, like I was like, this is like the deep conversations that moving your body forward can really kind of bring the insights. And we talked about data. We talked about statistics and how when seeking to have those conversations about what our communities need, resource, human, financial, often the question we're asked is, well, where's the data? Can you talk a little bit more about why it's not all about data? It can't be all about data.
Right, so it is and it isn't, right? Because we don't exist without data. Policies, politics, laws, everything that is decided through white supremacy and colonialism and capitalism is based on numbers. And these are categorizations that don't encompass our communities, that don't speak to our communities, that are made up ideas by white people. And so we have to, figure out how to capture our own data. So a lot of times, I'm speaking directly from indigenous communities, is that the building trust between indigenous people and a white person with a clipboard is like the scariest thing. That's not going to happen because of the history of mistrust with anthropologists, with doctors, all the ways that our bodies and our land and our resources have been used to capitalize upon. And so we have to build our own forms of data because we still know we have to work within these colonial systems that they ask for numbers because again, we don't exist on paper. Laws aren't going to change unless they can see how many black or brown people are doing X, Y, Z, which, it makes sense from an economic standpoint, of course. And so something that I've been doing when I first started Native Women Ride was I wanted to start a listserv, so I created my first survey. And then I realized how much valuable information I could get within these surveys. And so it really took my knowing what it's like to work with indigenous communities as a storyteller and how to peacefully enter these spaces with respect and take care and take time and not use extractive language and really, once again, give agency to the people filling out these forms. And I started to capture data about the writers, about all in the regions that they were in, the needs, which are very different. The writers that are in Navajo country are mainly going to be doing this kind of cycling. You have road riders here. And so, I'm capturing this data and I want to talk to people about it. So I'm reaching out to brands and nobody is listening. Nobody cares. I finally am speaking the white man's language with numbers and they're still not listening. And so that's where I'm at now, is that I have the cycling data for Native people. I've been working on it, I've been building it. I've been building trust within these communities and reaching out to indigenous healthcare communities, reaching out directly to tribal communities, because it's not something that I think is thought of when it comes to indigenous people. Largely in politics, it's really, yes, we want land back, that's number one. But we also do things like ride bikes, we run. We want to have access to these spaces. And especially within cycling, that data also reveals, as folks who are actually looking on the back end of this Strava data, is you see what kind of access to transportation exists and doesn't exist, right? Like you have to understand how to read this stuff because it's everything that is not there that is really revelatory. And so for me, I think of these kind of, the Venn diagram is all the research that I've done in the indigenous communities, which is in health, in higher education, in museum, in the arts. I understand now where the holes exist. So I have, indigenous community data, and then cycling data. And what does that look like? And when I bring them together, I try to find the places where they're not speaking to one another, where there's, and right now there's holes everywhere. Because, again, I don't know why, but there isn't an interest. We're continuing, the perpetuation of erasure of a Native people is very powerful. And it's part of the idea of America, right? It's the replacement theory. We no longer exist. And so some of the work I do, obviously, is in community, but in order to make it grow and make sense and find support, to build better roads on the reservations, to provide bikes, it has to be all-encompassing. I have to be able to convince a funder that there are health benefits, transportation benefits, equitable access benefits. There's all of these things that movement can do for a community. And when you start painting that more holistic picture, you hope that it makes more sense, right?
But we want more than hope, don't we? We want action.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
why we're here. It's action-orientated conversation.
Yeah.
Rasan, when we spoke pre this meeting on our Zoom, I said Zoom like Zoom. You said when we were talking about data, the importance, and I think I saw that in the UK on Sunday, Black Trail Runners hosted the most diverse trail running event that the UK's ever seen. It was 80% people of colour, 65% female. Like, the joy was just incredible. If you haven't seen the content, you need to kind of see the content. But there were a couple of very influential people there, and it reminded me of you as I was jumping around and emceeing on the day. Because you'd said in our call, you've got to get them to see physically. We're talking about brands. We're talking about anyone that wants to offer support to our communities. You've got to get them there to see it for themselves. And then ultimately, them seeing it and feeling it is what potentially brings that trust and that longevity of relationship on board. So can you talk about how important that's been to you in the foundation, getting people there to see it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wholeheartedly believe that. That Black Square Tuesday, I called it, I think I'm on the record for saying it was Sympathy Tuesday. And, during that time, almost every cycling publication wanted a quote from me. I guess I spoke for all Black people in cycling at that time. And I was pretty candid, It was a rough time for me. I didn't sleep much. I was so frustrated because I saw all that was going on. That was me, I was a lucky kid to avoid all that drama growing up in Compton. So yeah, I truly believe, we walk through life using our senses, our six senses, and that's where this idea of me talking about yes, I do need your money, 100%. The way we impact our community and the children that we work with, it takes funds. And we could scale the Bahati Foundation much bigger if we worked on a much bigger platform when it comes to dollars. But at the end of the day, the reason these checks that are coming in are so small is because they truly don't understand what it's like to be a kid growing up in an area where all you have is fast food. The grocery stores don't have fresh vegetables. There's no really good transportation. There's no bike lanes. I mean, there's so many things that are stacked up against inner city kids that you're like, all right, here's 10 grand, good luck. And it makes a little bit smidget of a difference, but I think when you come to these neighborhoods and you see the struggle that these young people are going through, I think your sympathy then turns to empathy, and then you will have a more impactful way of being involved in our community if you choose to. Like Charlie said, he's like, we're gonna do it with or without you. That's my foundation. We've been doing it with or without you. It wasn't until, I'm telling you, the last few years where we really started to get partners that were like, you know what, I get it now. They came to the bike giveaway. They saw what a giant bicycle or a live bicycle does for a young person, how their eyes light up. And now it's the first time being 14 years old and they just now learn how to ride a bike. That is life changing. So to all the people out there that want to be involved, want to have a meaningful impact on the community which we all serve, book your next ticket to Philly, to Compton, to LA, to South London, or where, I'm not that familiar with either. South could be like the Richie part, I don't even know. Is it South London, Richie?
It's in the trails. I'm not from South London. So he's from South London.
You're welcome. You can come.
Some girl told me, I'm from South London, and it just sounded like, I was like, that's cool. But that's where you need to go.
Yeah.
Because I think you would just have a better understanding, is using those sixth sense. You're gonna feel it.
Yeah.
That's why it's easy for us to get behind cancer awareness. We all know people that have died that are struggling or fighting this deadly disease. So it's easy to get behind that. We don't all know people who struggled. 9 people in my house, 1 bedroom. We don't know a lot of people that did that. When I was growing up, I thought it was normal. Yeah. It's not normal, you know? So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for that 2 cents. I'm looking at this countdown in front of me, and it's just giving me anxiety here because
It really says 22.
That's 22 minutes, right? You talk about, you know, that lived experience, that seeing it, empathize, that empathy that can lead to real trust and impactful relationships. You know, we're talking to a room full of really important people. You know, you wouldn't have been invited here today if you weren't important. And I know that these conversations can be really uncomfortable. But what we want to leave here with today isn't just a selfie and a hookup on Instagram. Like, that means nothing. What we want to leave here today with is action-orientated starts and beginnings of relationships. And Charlie, we spoke about that, you know, allies.
Yeah.
Like, what is, and I want to go to all of you, like, what is an ally to you? Who is an ally to you?
Wow, I mean, I think it's someone who actually really listens, who understands. You know, I became a better runner when I realized that once you become comfortable with the feeling of feeling uncomfortable, then you start to grow.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So people who are willing to sit in the conversation and have the uncomfortable conversation and really, really listen, and the listening goes both ways, you know, it's not just one-sided. Those are the type of people I consider to be my allies. Not people who just come in and spend a load of money and fix up the basketball court and then don't give you a coach.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I don't need a new basketball coach. I don't court. I just need the coach who's going to keep turning up. I don't need people who are going to judge what I do through an Instagram lens. I need people who are actually going to come to the session. You know? You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Yes, yes. Kira, what do you see going forward in terms of continuing to make the change? Because we've seen that swing, haven't we? We saw you swing to the left, and the swing to the right, and now we spoke about it. It's somewhere in the middle, and at times it feels like it's kind of moving backwards again. So what does allyship look like to you in terms of the brands that you work with and the organizations you work with? What works?
What works is shared responsibility. So you're listening to a panel of beautiful, brilliant people of color. And when you leave here, or you hear the next panel, or you go into next conversations, or you go into that quick business call, it is all of our responsibility to, again, look around, see who's there, who's not there, interrupt conversations, interrupt decisions. Maybe we need a little bit more time. I know we have this red tape, but maybe we need to do things a little bit different if we really want to create an equitable industry for everyone. And so that constant, and thankfully at the RIDC, I'm surrounded by a lot of white people who are willing to put their neck on the lines, who are willing to have hard conversations, who have, you know, unfortunately lost relationships, but for the betterment of progress for everyone. So they were willing to have the hard conversations. They were really they were willing to take on that self-accountability and check themselves and show up every time, no matter how hard it got. And so we see that around the leadership at RIDC, and we're seeing that in our partners who say, we want to commit to working with the RIDC over the next 3-5 years. But in terms of allyship in general, I really want my young nephews to be in this audience in 10, 20 years, and to be a CEO or owner of a brand. And again, that will take all of us in our daily actions to create a sense of shared responsibility and accountability.
Guarina.
I'll piggyback a little bit on what you said, which is, you know, this idea of the white folks that you work with being in this uncomfortable space and putting their neck on the line. That is very important, but then don't go pat yourself on the back just because you did that one thing, right? Like, step back still, because you're still learning. Like that is your job, you know, like that is your contribution to anti-racism, is to be uncomfortable and then not to like look for gratitude, right? For what you've done, not to be the center of attention afterwards. But I would say that for me, during the time that I've been trying to build Native Women Ride and moving forward, the biggest struggle that I've had is I have no sponsors. Does anybody want to sponsor?
Yeah, I mean.
Like, how ridiculous is that? That I ask people to see the work that I do, and then when they do give me money, which is little pennies, they want to micromanage it. They want to control me. They want me to send them updates and proof, receipts. All they want is receipts. And it's like, no. I'm not the help. Stop treating me like that. Trust that I am speaking for my community. You have seen the work that I do. I've done it. Nobody's paying me. That is not why I do it. I do it because I was one of those kids. I do it because I know what it's like to be unhoused. I know what it's like to have to fight for parents who have mental illness, to deal with the injustices of this country that are constantly trying to dismiss, everything that we are fighting for. If you're a woman of color, if you're unhoused, if you're looking for a job, if you feel like you're at a meeting and people are constantly gaslighting you. Don't do that. It's like, trust me. And you know what? If you lose that $10,000, it is pocket change. I will still have done something with it. And you know what? You can sleep better at night saying, you know what? I gave money to a Native woman. and a bunch, don't make me give you receipts. Trust that I will do the right thing. And I think that's something that, that's what I would leave with for all of us, is when we say we want you to be an ally, step up and then sit back, right? Like, respect it.
And finally, Rasan, what are you looking for?
As you would imagine, I've done a lot of panels with this topic, which, all of you said, could be very uncomfortable. And oftentimes, I look at these panels, it's almost like a funeral. Seriously, it's we can all come together in this moment. We can rally each other. We're telling our eulogies as an example. But within the next 24 to 48 hours, we kind of all go about our business, and it was kind of dope at that time. But then, back to reality.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, the reality for us is the reality we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And so, it's like we have to learn how to not bury this. Yeah. It needs to stay on top. So for me, the allies are people who are constantly engaging what we're doing. Constantly. Not the black square and then, all right, we put some black folks on the screen and we got some people running in our gear. It's like, no, man, we're going into the inner city. We're listening to these organizations. We're listening to these organizations. Quick story. I run this event with my business partner, who's actually in the audience somewhere, and it's called All Clubs. And the reason it's called All Clubs, because we want all people, not just us, we want all people to come together, because the reality is, we're on the bike, wearing our costumes with our helmets and funny glasses. We don't talk about much. We're trying to focus on the ride. And so let's strip all that down. Let's get dressed up and have a good time. And we're in our third year, and the feedback of All Clubs has been amazing, because it's really breaking bread with people. Some people don't like me until I'm off the bike. They get to know who I am off the bike. So I'm not going to go down that long rabbit hole, but that's ally for me, is people who continue to listen and continue to come to the table.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to have to wrap it up there, but we are here. We are here for you to talk to. We want to have meaningful, action-orientated conversations. We know that we can do it, with or without your support. We're doing this. We've been doing it. We continue to do it. We continue to break down barriers. We continue to make history. But what you need to ask yourself in this room, or if you're watching on the live stream, is going forward, what side of history do you want to be on? All right? So I want to say thank you to my man Charlie, Kiera, Irina, and Rasan. Big round of applause.
Good job, good job, good
Group
job.
hug. Group hug.
I appreciate it. Thank y'all. That was good. Thank you.